No, you're good. You're good. Thanks. Sorry, I have to record myself for everything for seminary, so I've got the recording here right in front of me. Rob's asking me about that. Good afternoon, everyone. A joy to be up here again. I haven't been, up there, up here, whichever. Been up here since October, and I'm taking another class that's got me preaching again. So this is good timing for me to be up here. It's on the joy of on preaching the joy of discipleship, and so Jesus calling the first disciples is I think a poignant text for that class. So I'm excited to talk about that today. This is the sixth and final sermon in our Body of Worship sermon series. If you haven't been here for all of them or can't keep them all straight in your head, we started with the flesh of worship with Pastor Jim. Then we went to worship of our ears with Dr. Amy, right? Then we went to worship of our mouths with the Reverend Dr. Pastor Rob, right? We went to worship of our hands with Deacon Sue. And then we went to worship of our knees with Janae, and this week you get worship with and of our feet with me. Now, the first thing I thought of when I read that list was, well, Janae and I got to get better titles. We don't get the fun things in front of our name. But the second thing that I noticed is that if we kind of take this sermon series too far in the metaphor space, we've covered a lot of more sedentary, stand-stillish type things. Now, in Lent, that actually makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Lent's a very reflective time. Traditionally, many of us give things up for Lent. We don't always add more things to do. We do more contemplative things, reflecting, repenting, sitting still, things of that nature. Now, in general, it's a time of year where the church allows for that space, right? We could be a little bit calmer. We're building towards Easter. But as we kind of end this worship with our bodies, lessons, and section, I think it's a very appropriate time as we approach Palm Sunday and Jesus triumphantly entering into Jerusalem that we start to think about the more active means of worship, the more active means of our faith in a physical manner. So, worship with our feet will lead us into Palm Sunday, where Jesus is going to ride in on the donkey. He's going to start the events of turning over tables and making the council angry, and he's going to eventually start in motion the events that are going to lead to his death. Then next week, a week and a day from today, we're going to relive and talk about the events of the Last Supper, where Jesus will again take those feet that the disciples used to follow him and wash them, right? Feet will be at the center of a lot of things that we are talking about. It's at the center of today's text, which goes back to the beginning. And so if you think about it, every kind of movie, new series, new franchise that has come out has told us that every good hero needs an origin story, right? And in Luke, the first 5 chapters really set that up for Jesus, right? So you start out, you have the story and the foretelling of John the Baptist's birth, and then you have the foretelling of Jesus's birth, and then you have the interactions with Mary and Elizabeth, and then you have the births of those two individuals. Then you hear about John the Baptist preparing the way, John the Baptist baptizing Jesus. You have Jesus's temptation, then you have Jesus's first solo mission, which then leads us into him calling his first team together, his first disciples. Now, if you're a Tolkien fan, this is that first Council of Elrond, right? If you're a Marvel Cinematic Universe fan, this is the Phase 1 movies. If you're a sports fan, this is the decision and LeBron forming the Heatles. All right? Okay? And, every origin story is designed to tell us a little bit about the who, the what, and the why. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this particular version in Luke of the story. We get a little bit more of the why. Now, I'm going from memory here because my sheets are magically out of order. So let me reorganize my sheets here. Just a second. Oh, this is fun. There it is. Where's page 2? But we've already read the Luke account, and the Luke account tells us a little bit of the why. We have the kind of the seminal event that we remember from this story, the throwing the nets overboard and then filling with fish, right? It's memorable. We hear that there's so many fish that the boats will sink. Now, if you've ever gone fishing before, which I have, that's not always the experience, right? And so we're going to come back to the fishing piece, but I also wanted to read out loud the Mark account, which was, and I'm actually going to use the Matthew version, but the Matthew and Mark are essentially the same language that we get, and that was the original text for today. And so I'm going to read the Mark account for you here just to get a sense of what the other Gospels say about this event. Starting in verse 18, going through 20. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. That's it. Right? That's what you get. That's what you get in Mark. That's what you get. And then you get the story about James and John, also in both of those versions as well. But the Peter piece is really, really short. And in fact, in the John version of the story, you get even less. You basically say, well, Andrew got his brother to follow Jesus. Okay? Because if you're me and you read John and you come to the conclusion that John and Peter have some kind of beef, I'm right there with you. Because every time John mentions Peter, Peter gets the short end of the stick. All right? So the first thing to note, though, is that depending on which account of this you read, it feels simultaneously very coincidental and very purposeful, right? The Mark and Matthew version of the story, Jesus is just strolling on the beach one day, listening to Summer Breeze, right? Summer breeze makes me feel fine. Walks up on two dudes on the boat, right? And there's not a lot of purpose to it, per se, right? It just feels like a very normal event. If you read the Luke account, it seems a little more intentional, a little more purposeful. Jesus starts out by teaching in the boat. Then Jesus asks them to cast out their nets from after teaching. And at that point where Peter is throwing the net over again, I think he's got an inkling that Jesus is something special, that Jesus is about to do something very special. I have for you here a picture that I'm going to show momentarily. I spent the summer of 2007 in Alaska. I hated it. It was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I was in a long-distance relationship at the time, which was pretty brutal. And then we all know that I don't own enough pairs of pants to live in Alaska. So there was that piece. And then the second element of that, or really the third, is they made me go fishing all the time. And I don't like fishing. I don't get it. And it's not only not fun for me, but I don't get why it's fun for other people. Like a lot of things I'm like, that's not for me, but I get why you like it. I don't even get it for the people who use it as an excuse to sit around and drink beer. Like, it's just, it does not compute for me. It's not my cup of tea, okay? And so you have to deal with hooks and worms. Everything gets tangled. You spend all day out there, and you may or may not actually accomplish literally anything, all right? It is the Song of Solomon of hobbies to me. It makes no sense, okay? Don't like it. Now, in case you're wondering, did you really give it a fair chance? Well, I went to Alaska, 2007. This is an old Facebook photo. This is me here on the Russian River, right? You see those three gentlemen fishing there. In case you're wondering which one I am, all right? I'm this glob of clothes on the rocks right here, taking a nap. We had gotten up at 3 a.m., we went out there, we fished, and then we fished some more. And we did no catching. We just did lots and lots and lots of fishing. I will tell you, to this day, I regret that nap. Not at all. Prime Alaskan salmon season, Russian River, I don't think twice about it. We took 28 men out there that day. We caught 2 fish in 12 hours. I just, incomprehensible to me that people think that's fun. Okay? So I can honestly tell you that whatever Jesus really had said in that lesson to get Peter to be like, yeah, after unsuccessfully fishing all night, I'm willing to listen to you and fish some more by throwing nets on the other side of the boat, because that's going to do it. Whatever Jesus said hit Peter hard. And he had an inkling that something special was about to happen, because to torture oneself again with more fishing would have been pretty remarkable to me. Now, Peter, in that moment, though, after he casts the nets over, the fish fill up and the boats start to sink, right? He has a response. Remember last week how we talked about our knees? He goes to his knees. He's at the knees of Jesus, right? His life is forever changed in that moment, right? He goes to his knees first. This is important. It fits our sermon series here, right? He's at his knees first. And while he's at his knees and he's worshiping Jesus and he's saying, Master, I'm a sinful man, get away from me, and the things that he says, right? Jesus lets him have that moment. We get a little other part of the story. And then Jesus says, come and follow me. Get up and use your feet, right? So the follow-up to on our knees in prayer, on our knees in worship, is to be up on our feet, to follow, to do, to act, to take an action step next. Now, once on his feet, Peter does a lot of remarkable things. Not only is he on the rock on which the church will be built, a lot of the Peter stories, they center initially around certain dialogue. Peter gets beat up pretty bad in some of the dialogue. Ye of little faith, get away from me, Satan. You will deny me 3 times. However, no disciple is quite as active with their feet either. Peter uses those feet to go out and share the good news as Jesus commands, 2 by 2. Peter uses those feet again to walk on water, which is pretty cool. Those feet fail him a little bit, if you've ever heard that Ocean song, right? They fail him in the moments they're powered by fear instead of faith. He falls in, gets the Ye of Little Faith title, all right? So from there, we're still out of order. He gets to follow Jesus up the mountain for transfiguration, which is a pretty cool use of the feet. He uses those feet to defend Jesus when Jesus is about to be arrested. He uses those feet to flee a little bit in shame after he denies Jesus. And then when he bounces back, seeing the resurrected Jesus, he rises to those feet to sprint to Jesus. A race that John claims John wins. Remember, John has it out for Peter, like I mentioned earlier, right? And after the ascension at the gate, on the way to the temple, he uses his faith to bring the crippled beggar to his feet and to go do the same. Right? The feet arc, the following arc of Peter's life is consistent, it's congruent, and it keeps on popping up. Lastly, he uses those feet to go and spread the gospel across the Mediterranean with the other disciples. Right? Peter's response to the act of Jesus showing him who he is to get up and go do something about it. Now, what it means to follow Jesus will look differently for everyone. It looks different for Peter than it does for each of us. And everyone's individual context will be different. Not every feet job, come follow me job, will fit great for every person. But we are called to go. We're called to be the light, if you've been paying attention to some things in our church. And we're called to make disciples of all nations. We're called to do a lot of going with our feet. Now, another example of using our feet came at this weekend's women's retreat, as many of the participants stood on their feet and joined a public act of protest, standing against injustice perpetrated by some folks in our government. This is not part of their plan. And a couple of people mentioned to me specifically that they were trying not to advertise the fact that they were going to go protest. Yet the Spirit moved people to act and go and carry out that action. A few weeks ago, in the midst of worship, we got up and packed bags for the Union Gospel Mission. We stood up in worship as if we were temporarily Pentecostals. We all got up together, moved around, got a little action in us. We packed bags, used our hands and our feet together to do the work of the Lord. Now, we also regularly rise to our feet and worship and sing. We rise to hear the gospel as we did today, and we rise to our feet to receive communion. Right? Our faith compels our feet into action. And our feet brings our bodies all around to do that worshiping we've been doing with our bodies in many places. So one more layer to that fishing story that I should probably bring up. I used to work with an organization referred to then as Campus Crusade for Christ, now called Cru. It's a group which I went to Alaska with, and it's a campus ministry group that is focused uniquely on two things: discipleship and evangelism. And anything you do in the church that is not one of those two things is a little bit frivolous in nature to them and considered less important. So as a result, I got pretty used to the fishing for people thing. Okay? We were trained on how to share the gospel. We were trained on a 2-minute version of our story. We were trained on a 5-minute version of our story. We were trained how to get the gospel out in an elevator ride. All right? They were about evangelism. They were about the gospel. They were about being the feet of Jesus. Now, we had all of those things down. We practiced with our other staff members. We did role plays. We did all the things you can imagine. We consistently tried new and different ways to get people to talk to us. We were the guys at Bass Pro Shop checking out all the new gear, bait, and lures. We were really into fishing. One of the things I learned in Alaska, though, is that there's a sport that's way more fun than fishing. It's called catching. Fishing I don't get. Catching, I learned quickly, was pretty cool. We went out off the Kenai Peninsula with our guide to go halibut fishing. And let me be clear, this was not the torturous grind that happened on the Russian River, okay? We took 6 people out on a boat. You baited your hook with what we Oregonians would call dinner. The bait was this big, okay, just to be clear. Big old bait. You baited the hook, and then within minutes, we caught over 1,000 pounds of fish. The reason is this boat had the Jesus fishing cheat code. You can sonar halibut in the Alaskan waters, and you know right where they are. You know right where to drop the lure. You pay a guy, he takes you on his boat, and you go catching. Catching was pretty cool. You had a fish on the hook right away. You got lots of food. I literally had 80 plus pounds of halibut meat that I brought home with me at that point. It was amazing. It was delicious. Let me tell you this. I may not like fishing, but catching is fun. Okay? But one thing I learned from that experience when I was on staff there is that if we only use our feet the one way, we miss out on a lot of the catching. After that summer in Alaska, I realized that a lot of students in our group felt disconnected from always just doing evangelism. That year, we went and built houses in Mexico. The first time that campus ministry had gone out to a foreign country to do a service project. They always went out to do evangelism work, but never did service with the evangelism. Now, the reason why I bring that up is it changed a lot of what the catching looks like. The ways that you impact people, yes, it's with the gospel, but it's also by living the gospel out. It's by being the feet of Jesus and bringing the gospel to these places, lived and embodied. We do it with our words, but we also do it with our hands, our feet, our mouths, our ears. It changed the perspective of a lot of people catching, of what catching was to a lot of people. It also brought me out of the parachurch world, where I realized I wanted to be about the totality of life in the church. I got back that next week, I made a phone call and I accepted the job I had been offered before I left to be a youth director at St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Fairfield, California. What it looked like to catch changed in my heart, and being a part of the church as a whole mattered more to me than it ever had before. I realized my feet needed to go more places and needed more ways to go there. It was the way I knew that I was supposed to follow Jesus. Part of this story is recognizing that we all have our own individual paths to follow Christ. Peter's path looked one way, mine looks another, and each of ours will look differently. But we can't sit still. We have to get up on those feet and go and follow Jesus. Amen.